Burkina Faso's Chinese arsenal, power, peril, and the future of the Sahel. China's Norinco shipped rocket launchers, self-propelled mortars, and armored carriers by the hundreds. The world barely noticed. But veterans know, new machines can either win wars or light a fuse that nobody can control. For shopkeepers, farmers, and fathers like Abdoulaye in northern Burkina Faso, security is not about geopolitics. It's about whether their children return home before dark. What you'll hear in the next minutes may surprise you. To understand today, we rewind to 2018. That year, Burkina Faso re-established diplomatic relations with Beijing. At first, the cooperation looked like simple aid projects. But in 2022, a military coup brought Captain Ibrahim Traoré to power. Traoré promised modernization, swift, uncompromising. By 2024, the promises turned into cargo manifests. On June 6th, Ouagadougou's airport received its first major shipment, 50 CS VP-14 mine-resistant vehicles, 40 VP-11s, plus armored carriers. It was the first of 5 planned deliveries. 6 months later, in December, the convoys doubled. Reports confirmed over 50 more MRAPs, 25 VN-22 armored fighting vehicles, 10 heavier VN-9s, plus Shackman trucks for logistics. Barely 3 weeks into 2025, another 100-plus vehicles rolled in, fuel trucks, transporters, and tractors. Then, in August 2025, the game changers arrived. The VN-22B, armed with a 30mm cannon and digital fire control. The PLL-05, a wheeled self-propelled gun mortar, and the SR-5 multiple rocket launcher, capable of firing guided or unguided rockets across dozens of miles. In a war defined by roadside bombs and ambushes, this isn't just rearmament, it's a transformation. The next chapter proves why. A political earthquake. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger announced they are leaving ECOWAS, the West African bloc long backed by the US and France. Together, they form the Alliance of Sahel States, or AES. For the generals, this means one thing: freedom. Freedom from Western conditions. No more waiting for Washington or Paris to approve each batch of rifles or each training session. Instead, Beijing offers what they need: fast, discreet, and in bulk. AES leaders frame this as self-reliance. A new beginning where African armies share fuel depots, logistics corridors, and counterattack plans without interference. But for families crossing borders, the costs are real. Trade slows, travel permits tighten, and diplomatic isolation grows. Overlay map showing US. Shifting presence toward Ivory Coast, Benin, Guinea. French troops redeploy to the coast. US. Planners explore Benin and Ivory Coast for drone hubs and training sites. In the Sahel's heartland, a vacuum opens, and China is quick to fill it. The answer is darker than any hardware on display. Because this is where the war stops being about numbers and starts being about lives. 2024 was one of the bloodiest years for civilians in Burkina Faso. Jihadist groups killed thousands. But human rights monitors say the army and pro-government militias also left their mark in ways that could haunt the nation for decades. February 25, 2024. Villages of Nondon and Soro in the Nord region. 223 civilians killed in a single day. March 2025. Boucle du Muhun. 130 Fulani villages massacred. In Zongo and elsewhere, mass graves became too common to count. International groups warn unchecked abuses don't just break laws, they fuel recruitment. Each time a family loses a son to government fire, armed groups gain 2 new fighters. Every SR-5 rocket can clear a ridge, but one wrong strike can undo months of gains. The AES alliance gives it new partners. China supplies weapons at record speed. The West watches from the sidelines, shifting its footprint to the Atlantic coast. But civilians are paying the highest price. In the next chapter, we dive into what America really sees: the risk of ungoverned deserts, the rise of new foreign patrons, and whether Chinese rockets in Ouagadougou threaten not just the Sahel, but the world beyond. Part 2 will push that question even further. January 2025 was more than a new year. It was a turning point. On the 3rd day of the month, a convoy of more than 100 vehicles arrived. CSVP-14 MRAPs, VN-22s, VN-9s, plus 90 Shackman H-3000 trucks. For the military, it was a victory parade before the battle. At last, mobility, armor, and logistics in one package. The message to insurgents was clear: we are no longer waiting on the West. On January 29th, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger walked out of ECOWAS. They joined hands as the Alliance of Sahel States, the AES. It wasn't just a political move. It was a declaration. The core of the Sahel would chart its own path with or without Europe and America. Trade slowed. Travel papers became harder. Sanctions loomed. Yet, for AES leaders, the prize was worth it. Complete freedom to rearm, reorganize, and resist. Let me know. For decades, the Sahel's stability leaned on Western boots. France led Operation Barkhane until 2022. America provided $160 million in security aid and ISR flights. But after successive coups, the tide turned. French forces left Burkina in 2023. The U.S. suspended aid after the 2022 putsch and by 2024 prepared to exit Niger's Airbase 201. For Washington, political instability made partnership impossible. Yet terrorism doesn't wait. With Western forces gone, jihadist groups gained room to maneuver. Villages that once saw French patrols now waited alone. Lighter, smaller, more political acceptable deployments. But further from the fight, the Sahel's core, the tri-border of Burkina, Mali, Niger, was left to AES and its new suppliers. Not with troops, not with trainers, with cargo manifests and sealed crates. Drop your thoughts below. In African capitals, images matter as much as operations. When Ouagadougou displayed its new arsenal, it wasn't just steel, it was a message. The VN-22B, sleek, fast, with a 30mm cannon. The PLL-05, a hybrid mortar system firing indirect rounds from mobile platforms. The SR-5, capable of saturating targets miles away with guided or unguided salvos. These weren't just machines. They were proof that Burkina Faso could turn east and find partners willing to deliver. No democracy clauses, no lectures, no wait. To opponents, it was dependency disguised. Because each weapon delivered meant new training needs, new spare parts, and a tether to Chinese supply chains. Freedom, yes, but a freedom hooked to Beijing's factories. Every delivery was leverage. Every convoy tied Ouagadougou closer to the east. People do. And here, the story takes a darker turn. The next part may anger you. While generals celebrated deliveries, families buried their dead. Between January and August 2024, over 1,000 civilians were killed by jihadist groups. But reports also accuse Burkina Faso's own forces and allied militias of brutal reprisals. February 2024, Nondin and Soro, 223 villagers killed. March 2025, Boucle du Muhun, more than 130 Fulani civilians massacred. Each report carried the same warning: abuses by the state fuel insurgent recruitment. This is the paradox at the heart of the AES gamble. Yes, new weapons can chase insurgents faster. Yes, convoys can move safely across mined roads. But if civilians are killed without justice, the enemy grows stronger, and the memory lasts longer than the smoke. It's whether they can win without losing their people. And that's the question America and the world are watching closely. Should aid be unconditional, or should human rights always come first? Hunger. Displacement. In Burkina Faso, nearly 2 million people are uprooted from their homes. Entire villages are ghost towns, abandoned after jihadist raids or military reprisals. Families crowd into makeshift camps near Ouagadougou, Kaya, and Dori, living on borrowed time and borrowed food. The UN estimates more than 1 in 4 Burkinabe faces hunger. When roads are mined, when convoys are ambushed, humanitarian aid cannot reach the front lines. And when farmers flee fields, the land turns to dust. The road that once brought customers now brings convoys of armored vehicles. He tells us, food costs more than bullets. The AES may have stronger armies, but civilians grow weaker every month. This is where security becomes survival. In 2024 alone, over 500,000 Burkinabe fled across borders into Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Togo. Some head south, dreaming of stability in coastal cities. Others cross into Mali and Niger, ironically into zones of equal or greater instability. For the young, the choice is harsher. Stay and risk being killed or recruited. Leave and risk being stateless. For fathers and mothers, each mile walked is a gamble with their children's lives. Aid groups warn of a lost generation, millions of children without education, caught between guns and exile. 3 nations, 1 alliance, united against jihadist terror. In speeches, Capt. Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, Assimi Goïta of Mali, and Abdourahmane Tiani of Niger declare sovereignty, self-reliance, and a new dawn for Africa. But legitimacy is not declared, it is earned. And in village after village, ordinary Burkinabe question what this dawn means. When markets stay empty, when neighbors vanish in raids, when aid is blocked at borders, people see not independence, but abandonment. The AES promised security, yet insecurity spreads. The AES promised dignity, yet reports of massacres by state forces erode trust. Internationally, legitimacy erodes too. Western partners see the AES as isolationist, drifting into China's orbit. Human rights groups speak of war crimes. Even in Africa, ECOWAS members criticize the breakaway bloc, fearing instability will spill across borders. The more weapons AES acquires, the more questions arise. Not about their strength, but their morality. Lose legitimacy and you lose the war. Because that's the real battlefield now. For them, the Sahel is no longer just Africa's problem. It's a potential launching pad for global threats. The fall of legitimacy, the rise of foreign patrons, the flood of displaced populations, all these echo past crises in Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq. China's role is clear. Fast weapons, no conditions. America's dilemma is sharper. Should it re-engage, risk lives and politics, or watch from the sidelines as influence slips? For 2 decades, America invested in intelligence, training, and logistics here. Drones flew from Niger. Special forces trained units in Burkina Faso and Mali. But coups changed the rules. One by one, allies turned into uncertain partners. Aid was frozen, bases shuttered. By 2024, the U.S. prepared to leave Niger, its most important foothold in the region. The message was clear. America had grown tired of fighting for partners who no longer listened. Yet every strategist in D.C. knows a truth. The Sahel is not just about Africa. It's about preventing the birth of ungoverned spaces, deserts where groups like ISIS or Al-Qaeda plot attacks that reach far beyond dusty borders. Re-engage and risk U.S. troops in another endless conflict. Step back and watch as China and Russia fill the void. Stay involved or step away. Convoys of Norinco armor arrive in Ouagadougou before the ink on agreements dries. Beijing gains leverage not just through weapons, but through dependence. Spares, training, and ammunition all tie AES armies to Chinese supply chains. America's model is slower. Aid comes with conditions, democracy, accountability, human rights. Training takes months, approvals take years. For African leaders fighting wars today, that model feels too slow. For China, speed wins influence. But history reminds us, fast influence is fragile. Without legitimacy, new weapons rust. Without accountability, new armies fracture. During the Cold War, nations from Angola to Afghanistan became arenas where superpowers shipped weapons faster than food. Each side believed firepower would secure influence. But veterans know the lesson. Weapons may win battles, but legitimacy wins wars. In Vietnam, high-tech U.S. firepower could not outweigh the collapse of trust with local villagers. In Afghanistan during the 1980s, Soviet tanks rolled, but hearts turned away. Today, in Burkina Faso, echoes of history ring loud. Chinese VN-22s and SR-5s may dominate terrain, but without legitimacy, they may become just another layer of rust in Sahel's endless wars. On one road, new firepower, self-reliance, and a dream of sovereignty. On the other, hunger, displacement, and the risk of losing the very people it seeks to protect. For America, for China, for the world, the choice is not about who sells more weapons. It's about whether the Sahel becomes a shield of stability or a breeding ground for chaos. For Burkina Faso families, the choice is simpler. A father wants his children home for dinner. A mother wants her sons to grow up farmers, not fighters. And for us, watching from afar, the choice is whether we pay attention before it's too late. Share this story. Pray for the Sahel. And remember, what happens in Burkina Faso may one day matter on your own street.